spent night with slash random at a club. When I got home, all the locks were changed and my stuff outside. Hey Reddit, long-time lurker, but first-time posting, and I'm here to share my story with you all today. My name is Ashley, and I am a 29-year-old woman. I've been married to my husband, Jason, a 30-year-old man, for about 3 years now. Jason and I are childhood friends and have been with each other all our life. We were each other's firsts in everything, from first kiss to everything else. Jason and I first met when I was 7 years old and he was 8. His family had just moved into their neighborhood, and our friendship blossomed quickly. We spent hours playing together, exploring the neighborhood and sharing secrets. As we grew older, our bond deepened, and they became inseparable childhood friends. We shared everything with each other, from our dreams and aspirations to our fears and challenges. Our friendship was a source of comfort and joy throughout our childhood and teenage years. On our first date, Jason and I were both a mix of excitement and nerves. We had been friends for so long, and now taking that leap into a romantic relationship felt both thrilling and a bit surreal. I remember arriving at the cozy restaurant where Jason had planned our date. Seeing him waiting there with a warm smile instantly eased my nerves. We greeted each other with excitement, exchanging playful banter and catching up on each other's day. Throughout the evening, we talked about everything imaginable. From our favorite childhood memories to our dreams for the future, our conversation flowed effortlessly. I was amazed by how comfortable and natural it felt to be with Jason in this new context. Jason's attentiveness and care didn't go unnoticed. He made me feel so valued and appreciated, and I found myself falling for him even more as the night went on. As we enjoyed our meal together, laughter filled the air, and there were moments of shared interest that brought us closer. I cherished every moment of that evening, feeling a growing sense of intimacy and connection with Jason. After dinner, we took a romantic stroll through the nearby park hand in hand. The night seemed magical as we talked about our hopes and dreams, basking in the glow of newfound love. And then, under the starlit sky, Jason leaned in for a sweet kiss that melted my heart. On our second date, Jason surprised me with a thoughtful and adventurous outing that showcased his creativity and thoughtfulness. He picked me up with a playful grin on his face, hinting at the surprise he had planned for the day. As we drove to our destination, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and curiosity, wondering what he had in store for us. Jason took me to a charming outdoor market that was bustling with activity. We explored the stalls together, sampling delicious treats, trying on quirky accessories, and sharing laughter at the various vendors' antics. One of the highlights of our second date was when Jason suggested we try a new activity together: pottery painting. Neither of us had tried it before, but we dove in with enthusiasm, choosing our ceramic pieces and selecting vibrant paints. Sitting side by side, we let our creativity flow, painting designs that reflected our personalities and shared moments. It was such a fun and relaxing experience, and I enjoyed seeing Jason's artistic side emerge as he focused on his masterpiece. Afterward, we walked around the market again, hand in hand, enjoying the lively atmosphere and each other's company. We stopped for a delicious lunch at a cozy cafe, where we continued our conversations and shared stories from our past. The day flew by in a blur of laughter, shared experiences, and a growing bond between us. By the end of our second date, I always knew that there was something special blossoming between Jason and me. On our third date, Jason planned a romantic evening filled with surprises that left me feeling cherished and appreciated. He picked me up in the late afternoon, and as soon as I got into the car, I noticed a small bouquet of my favorite flowers on the passenger seat. It was such a sweet gesture that it instantly put a smile on my face. Jason took me to a beautiful park near the outskirts of town. The park was known for its scenic trails, tranquil ponds, and stunning sunset views. We started our date with a leisurely stroll along the winding paths, enjoying the peaceful ambiance and the sound of nature around us. As the sun began to set, Jason led me to a secluded spot by the pond where he had set up a picnic blanket and a basket filled with delicious snacks and refreshments. It was a thoughtful setup, complete with candles and fairy lights that added a magical touch to the setting. We sat down to enjoy our picnic, savoring the food and engaging in deep, meaningful conversations. Jason opened up about his dreams and aspirations, sharing his hopes for the future and his excitement about our growing connection. After we finished eating, Jason surprised me again by pulling out a guitar from behind the blanket. He confessed that he had been learning to play a few songs and wanted to serenade me under the stars. With the gentle strumming of the guitar as background music, Jason sang heartfelt songs that spoke to our budding romance, and the feelings we were beginning to develop for each other. It was a truly magical moment, and I felt so special and cherished in his presence. As the night grew darker, we packed up our picnic and took a slow walk back to the car, basking in the warmth of the evening and the happiness that filled our hearts. By the end of our third date, I knew without a doubt that Jason was someone special, someone who made me feel loved, appreciated, and excited about the future we could share together. On our fourth date, Jason surprised me with a fun and adventurous day filled with new experiences and laughter. He picked me up early in the morning, and this time, he had a mischievous twinkle in his eye that hinted at something exciting planned for the day. I couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation and curiosity as we drove to our first destination. Our first stop was an amusement park that had just opened a new roller coaster, known for its twists, turns, and exhilarating loops. Jason knew I loved thrill rides, so he had arranged for us to be among the first to experience the new attraction. We spent the morning riding roller coasters, playing carnival games, and indulging in delicious fare food. It was a carefree and joyous time, filled with laughter and shared moments of excitement as we conquered each ride together. After a few hours of thrilling adventures, Jason surprised me again by taking me to a pottery painting studio. It was a creative and relaxing activity that allowed us to express our artistic sides while enjoying each other's company. We spent the afternoon painting pottery pieces, chatting, and getting to know each other on a deeper level. Jason's thoughtful gestures and genuine interest in my thoughts and feelings made me feel incredibly comfortable and connected to him. As the day turned into evening, Jason took me to a cozy restaurant with a romantic ambiance. We enjoyed a delicious dinner, savoring the food and the company, and reminiscing about the fun moments we had shared throughout the day. By the end of our fourth date, I knew that Jason was not only fun-loving and adventurous, but also attentive and caring. Each date with him was a new adventure, and I enjoyed them immensely. After graduating from college, Jason and I were eager to take our relationship to the next level. We had spent years building a strong bond as childhood friends and then as high school sweethearts, and moving in together felt like a natural progression for us. The decision to move in together was a very exciting one, filled with anticipation and dreams of creating a shared space where we could build our future. We found a cozy apartment in the heart of the city, a place that felt like a new beginning for both of us. The process of moving in together was both thrilling and challenging. We had to merge our belongings, decorate the apartment to reflect our personalities, and navigate the dynamics of sharing space and responsibilities. Despite the occasional disagreements and adjustments that come with cohabitation, living with Jason was a dream come true. We enjoyed cooking meals together, binge-watching our favorite shows, and creating new memories in our shared home. Moving in together solidified our commitment to each other and strengthened our bond even further. It was a significant milestone in our relationship back then. A year after moving in together, Jason and I had settled into a comfortable routine. Our relationship had matured, and we were navigating life's challenges together with ease. One evening, Jason suggested we go for a walk in our favorite park. It was a quiet, peaceful night, perfect for reflection and conversation. As we strolled hand in hand, Jason seemed deep in thought. Eventually, we found a secluded bench overlooking a serene pond. Jason took a deep breath and turned to me, his eyes filled with sincerity. He spoke from the heart, expressing his love and admiration for our journey together. There were no grand gestures or elaborate speeches, just genuine words that touched my soul. Then, in a simple yet meaningful moment, Jason took out a small box from his pocket. He didn't get down on one knee or make a dramatic declaration. Instead, he quietly asked me to marry him. I was taken aback by the sincerity in his eyes and the simplicity of the proposal. It felt genuine and heartfelt, reflecting the deep connection we shared. Tears welled up in my eyes. Lowell, I nodded. I was unable to contain my emotions. Jason smiled. It wasn't a fairy tale proposal, but it was ours. A moment of genuine love and commitment that meant more to me than any grand gesture could. As Jason and I started planning our wedding, our excitement mingled with stress. We wanted our special day to be perfect, reflecting our love and commitment to each other. However, the reality of wedding planning often brought unexpected challenges and moments of tension. It wasn't as easy as we thought it would be. We began by discussing the guest list, a task that seemed simple at first but quickly turned into a balancing act of family expectations and budget constraints. Negotiating who to invite and who to leave out became a delicate dance that required a lot of compromises and open communication. Venue hunting was another adventure. We visited countless locations, from rustic barns to elegant ballrooms, each with its own charm and drawbacks. Finding the ideal balance of ambiance, capacity, and affordability felt like searching for a needle in a haystack. Choosing vendors added another layer of complexity. We wanted the best photographer, caterer, and florist within our budget, but navigating contracts, pricing, and availability tested our patience and decision-making skills. The dress fitting was both exhilarating and nerve-wracking. Finding the perfect gown that made me feel beautiful yet comfortable was a journey of its own. Alterations, fittings, and last-minute adjustments added to the whole stress of wedding preparations. Despite the chaos, Jason and I leaned on each other for support. We made decisions together, tackled challenges as a team, and reminded ourselves of the love and joy that awaited us on our wedding day. Despite the stress and occasional disagreements, every detail fell into place, and our wedding day was everything we had dreamed of. The vows we exchanged, surrounded by loved ones, was like the beginning of a new chapter filled with love and laughter. After our honeymoon, which was a blissful retreat paid for by Jason's generous parents, we returned home to settle into married life. Our plan was to save up for a house after our first year of marriage, but things didn't go as smoothly as we had hoped. I must admit I have a weakness for indulgence and spending, which clashed with Jason's more frugal nature. Despite his advice to save money, I found myself splurging on things that caught my eye, thinking we had plenty of time to save. As the deadline to buy a house approached, it became clear that my spending habits had hindered our savings. Jason was understandably frustrated. He had envisioned us going 50-50 on our dream home, but my lack of savings made that impossible. In the end, Jason decided to purchase the house in his name alone. He returned the little amount I had managed to save to me, which only added to my frustration. We argued about it, and I insisted on having my name on the house's deed, but Jason stood firm in his decision. I was upset and disappointed in myself for not being able to contribute as planned, but I was also pissed at Jason because he couldn't just put my name on the deed. However, as time passed, I found myself growing increasingly dissatisfied with my job. The monotony of the daily grind and the stress of the corporate environment started wearing on me, and I couldn't help but envy the seemingly beautiful lives of my friends who were stay-at-home moms. They had the luxury of spending time with their children and pursuing their passions while their husbands provided for the family. I began to long and yearn for a similar lifestyle. I knew that Jason's income was more than sufficient to support us comfortably, considering he earned nearly 7 times what I made. I talked to him about the idea of becoming a stay-at-home wife with him, believing it would bring me the fulfillment and happiness I craved. When I mentioned it to Jason, he was taken aback. He questioned why I wanted to make such a drastic change when we didn't have any children yet. I tried to explain that many of my friends were stay-at-home moms without kids, but he pointed out that their circumstances were different. They had children to care for. Despite his initial reluctance, I continued to press the issue. I was determined to make this change, convinced that it was the right decision for me. Eventually, Jason relented, perhaps seeing how important it was to me. I wasted no time in resigning from my job, giving my 2 weeks' notice and eagerly anticipating the freedom and fulfillment that awaited me as a stay-at-home wife. But oh, was I wrong. As the days turned into weeks and weeks into months, I quickly realized that being a stay-at-home wife was not the picture-perfect dream I had imagined. The initial excitement of leaving my job and having more time on my hands quickly gave way to boredom and frustration. At first, I relished the idea of having more freedom and time for myself. However, I soon found myself drowning in a sea of household chores and mundane tasks. From cooking and cleaning to grocery shopping and laundry, the responsibilities piled up faster than I could keep track. I started to feel overwhelmed and exhausted. I would ask Jason for help with some of the chores, hoping for a bit of relief, but he would remind me that I had chosen to be a stay-at-home wife, and therefore taking care of the household was primarily my responsibility. His words stung, and I began to resent the situation. I had envisioned a life of leisure and fulfillment, but instead I found myself trapped in a cycle of monotonous tasks and endless chores. The days stretched on, each one blending into the next with no excitement or purpose. I missed the sense of accomplishment and independence I had from my job. I longed for meaningful interactions and intellectual stimulation. The reality of being a stay-at-home wife was far from glamorous. It was a constant juggling act of chores, boredom, and unfulfilled expectations. As the days of mundane routine wore on, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of resentment toward Jason. In my twisted mind, I began to blame him for everything. the endless chores, the boredom, and the lack of fulfillment in my new role as a stay-at-home wife. I resented him for not understanding the overwhelming workload I was facing. Every time I asked for help or expressed my frustration, he would simply brush it off, reminding me that this was what I had wanted, to be a stay-at-home wife. His words felt like a slap in the face, dismissing my struggles and invalidating my feelings. I resented him for not appreciating the effort I put into managing the household. The countless hours spent cooking, cleaning, and organizing seemed to go unnoticed and unacknowledged. I longed for a word of gratitude or a gesture of support, but all I received was indifference. I resented him for not realizing how lonely and isolated I felt. The days dragged on, devoid of meaningful interactions or intellectual stimulation. I missed the camaraderie of coworkers and the sense of purpose that came from my job. Jason's absence during the day left me feeling adrift, trapped in a sea of chores with no respite in sight. I resented him for not sharing in the emotional labor of our relationship. While I struggled with my new role and battled feelings of inadequacy, he seemed content to come home from work, unwind, and relax without a care in the world. His obliviousness to my inner turmoil only fueled my resentment further. In my mind, Jason had become the symbol of everything that was wrong with my life: the lack of fulfillment, the boredom, the isolation, and the unspoken expectations. I knew deep down that my resentment was misplaced and unfair, but in those moments of frustration and despair, it was easier to blame him than to confront the complexities of my own emotions. As my feelings of resentment grew, I began to cling to the idea that having a baby would somehow fill the void and bring meaning to my life. I shared this newfound desire with Jason, hoping that he would understand and support my decision. However, his reaction was not what I expected. Jason was surprised by my sudden insistence on starting a family earlier than we had planned. We had agreed to wait until our mid-30s before seriously considering having children, and we were not there yet. He reminded me of our agreement and expressed his concerns about the timing and readiness for such a significant life change. I tried to argue my case, explaining how I felt unfulfilled and yearned for the experience of motherhood. I painted a picture of how having a baby would bring us closer together as a family and give me a sense of purpose and joy. But this time, Jason didn't budge. He calmly explained that bringing a child into our lives was a decision that required careful consideration and preparation. He pointed out practical concerns such as financial stability, emotional readiness, and the impact it would have on our lifestyle. He urged me to think about the long-term implications and not rush into such a life-altering decision. Despite his rational arguments, I couldn't shake off the feeling that a baby was the solution to my dissatisfaction. I felt a deep longing to nurture and love a child, believing that it would fill the void I felt in my life. However, Jason's firm stance forced me to confront the reality that rushing into parenthood without proper planning and readiness would only lead to more challenges and difficulties. In the end, I had to reluctantly accept Jason's decision and put my desire for a baby on hold. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but deep down, I knew he was right. I was just too stubborn to actually realize it. About a year passed by in my role as a stay-at-home wife. I began to feel a sense of restlessness creeping in. The routine of chores and domestic responsibilities became monotonous, and I longed for the sense of accomplishment and purpose that came with working outside the home. It was then that I made the decision to rejoin the workforce. I approached Jason with my decision, half expecting resistance or concern, but to my surprise, he was supportive. He simply said, "Whatever makes you happy," and left it at that. With his encouragement, I embarked on the journey of job searching, eager to find a position that would reignite my passion and provide a sense of fulfillment. However, the reality of re-entering the job market after being away for a year hit me hard. So much had changed during that time, and I felt a bit overwhelmed and out of touch with the professional landscape. The job search was more challenging than I anticipated, and I faced setbacks and rejections along the way. After much effort and persistence, I finally landed a job, albeit one that paid considerably less than my previous position. It was a compromise I had to make, accepting a lower salary for the sake of getting back into the workforce and regaining a sense of independence and purpose. While it wasn't ideal financially, I was determined to make the most of this opportunity and rebuild my career trajectory from there. As I settled into my new job and navigated the challenges of balancing work and home life, I couldn't help but notice the freedom and independence enjoyed by some of my single coworkers. They had the flexibility to make spontaneous decisions, pursue personal interests, and experience life without the responsibilities of marriage and family. I found myself envying their lifestyle at times, feeling as though Jason had trapped me in a role I wasn't fully prepared for. While I loved him and appreciated his support, there were moments when I yearned for the carefree days of being single, when my choices and decisions were solely my own. In a twisted way, I missed the sense of self-discovery and exploration that comes with being single. I felt like I had missed out on opportunities to experiment with different aspects of myself, to chase dreams and passions without the constraints of marital obligations. I had been with Jason for as long as I could remember, so I never really got a chance to experiment with other people. As the envy towards my single co-workers grew stronger, I found myself thinking about an idea that had taken root in my mind. It was a daring thought, one that I knew would shake the foundation of our relationship, but I finally mustered the courage to share it with Jason. I sat him down and explained how I felt. I expressed my desire to explore and experiment with other people. After all, we had been together for such a long time, and I felt like I never got the chance to experience what else was out there. Jason's initial reaction was shock, followed by concern. He asked me if I wasn't happy with our relationship, to which I assured him that I was content and loved him deeply. However, my curiosity and longing for new experiences persisted, leading me to drop a bombshell on Jason. I proposed the idea of opening up our marriage. I explained that I was very curious about exploring relationships with others while still maintaining our bond. Jason's response was immediate and firm. He disagreed vehemently, stating that opening our marriage was a deal-breaker for him. We argued intensely about it, with me trying to explain my perspective and him standing firm on his beliefs. The conversation left me feeling frustrated and angry. I couldn't understand why he wouldn't consider my desires and why he was so resistant to the idea. It created a huge rift between us, and I began to question whether we could find a middle ground or if this was a fundamental difference that would always divide us. As my frustration with Jason's refusal to consider opening our marriage grew, I adopted a passive-aggressive approach in our relationship. I thought that if I ignored him and put in minimum effort in the household chores, he would eventually relent and agree to my proposal. However, things didn't go as planned. I started to withdraw emotionally, distancing myself from our usual interactions. I stopped putting in the same level of effort in maintaining the house, hoping that Jason would notice and understand the depth of my dissatisfaction. However, instead of leading to a breakthrough in our discussions, my behavior only created more tension between us. Jason noticed the change in my mood, attitude, and the lack of effort in the house. He confronted me about it, expressing concern and asking if something was wrong. I brushed off his concerns, unwilling to engage in a meaningful conversation until he addressed my proposal for an open marriage. Days turned into weeks, and despite my attempts to push him towards acceptance, Jason remained stubborn in his decision. The strain in our relationship grew, and I began to realize that my passive-aggressive tactics were only causing more harm than good, but I was still too stubborn to back down. I talked to my best friend during that tough time, and she said to keep ignoring Jason. She thought he'd eventually give in. She even said if he didn't, I could cheat on him. She thought if he found out, he'd have to listen to me because he loves me. And then I thought she had a point and might be right. But now that I have had time to think about it, I know now that she was very wrong. I felt such a mixture of anger, frustration, and resentment towards Jason. I thought that no matter what I did, he would always love me. So I became passive-aggressive, hoping he would realize how unhappy I was. I stopped wearing my wedding ring and put extra effort into my appearance, hoping he would notice and ask what was wrong. But instead of addressing the issues, I distanced myself emotionally and refused to listen when he tried to talk to me. Days passed and my attitude only got worse. I found myself staying out later and later. I immersed myself in socializing with friends, seeking solace and distraction from the growing rift in my marriage that I had caused, and also trying to force Jason so he would give in. I spent more time outside the home, often coming back late at night when Jason was already asleep. In my mind, I justified my actions. I was convinced that Jason had trapped me in a life I didn't choose fully. I felt like I deserved to explore my freedom while still having the security of my marriage with Jason. It was a selfish desire to have both worlds without considering the consequences. Despite Jason's attempts to talk and mend our relationship, I remained stubborn, and I kept on refusing to listen or consider his perspective. One fateful night, after another failed conversation, Jason expressed his frustration with my attitude. This sparked a heated argument, and in a fit of anger, I stormed out of the house and went to a bar. I immediately started drinking, and even though I had planned to only drink, there was this really handsome guy at the bar. I think the alcohol also made me a bit wilder because one thing led to another, and I was full on making out with the guy, and I headed back to his place with him. The next morning, I woke up feeling guilty and regretful. I hurriedly left the stranger's place. I was overwhelmed with shame. On my way home, I realized that my actions were a result of my own dissatisfaction and unfair blame on Jason for our marital issues. I decided to mend my relationship with Jason, starting with an apology and a commitment to never repeat her mistake. Deep down, I knew that honesty about her infidelity would only cause more damage to their already strained marriage. Jason would never forgive me, so I planned to never ever tell him. As I arrived home, I started getting a sinking feeling in my chest, and it only grew stronger. My heart started racing as I noticed my belongings scattered outside the house, and the unfamiliar locks on the door confirmed my fears. Jason had changed the locks. That was a clear sign that he had reached a breaking point. Jason wasn't home. I tried knocking multiple times. He was likely off to work. I messaged Jason, hoping to explain and apologize, but his response shattered any hope of reconciliation. He told me that he knew about my night at a stranger's place. He reminded me that we shared locations. I was horrified. I had forgotten that I shared locations with Jason, and it had slipped my mind to turn it on. The realization that I had left my location on and shared it with Jason hit me like a ton of bricks. I called him repeatedly, desperate to talk and make amends, but he ignored my calls. His text message cut through me. He bluntly stated that he wanted me to take my things and leave, and that he wanted a divorce. The weight of my actions and their consequences crashed down on me as I faced the harsh reality that I had ruined my marriage and lost my husband. Feeling devastated and lost, I called for an Uber to take me to my parents' place. The ride felt like an eternity. I was filled with so much regret, sorrow, and the weight of the impending divorce. When the car pulled up to my childhood home, I couldn't hold back the tears that started streaming down my face, knowing that I had lost the life I had built with Jason. As I stepped into my parents' house with my belongings, the weight of the situation hit me even harder. It was barely a minute after I arrived that I received a notification on my phone. Jason had withdrawn 95% of the money from our joint account, leaving me with only 5%, which he deemed as my share. The shock and betrayal made me start crying again as I tried to process what had just happened. I had always been extravagant, never really saved much, and now I was facing the consequences of my financial irresponsibility. My parents were shocked to see me in such a state, carrying my things back home like a defeated soldier. Their concern was evident as they tried to comfort me, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of failure and loss that engulfed me. I settled back into my old childhood room, surrounded by familiar sights and memories. My parents' caring nature shone through, and honestly, my parents helped me so much. They could sense that something was wrong, but instead of bombarding me with questions, they simply made me a comforting meal and let me take my time to gather my thoughts. I remember the aroma of home-cooked food wafting through the house, bringing such a sense of warmth and comfort that I desperately needed at that moment. My parents' silent support spoke volumes. Their unspoken understanding was a soothing balm to my wounded soul. After the meal, my parents helped me unpack my bags and settle back into my room. It was a bittersweet feeling being back in my childhood space, surrounded by memories of simpler times. Yet in that moment, I felt a sense of safety and love that I hadn't experienced in a long while. I decided to take a nap, and when I woke up to a barrage of messages and missed calls from my friends and even Jason's parents and siblings. They had all learned everything from Jason, including my infidelity, and I was being blamed for everything. Jason has even reached out to my parents. That was when I truly realized the extent of the mess I had created. Jason's swift action in reaching out to my parents and others to share what had happened left me feeling so exposed and vulnerable. I couldn't believe that Jason had taken such drastic steps so quickly, but I also couldn't deny the truth behind his actions. I finally had time to process the events of the previous night and the consequences of my actions. I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of regret. I knew that repairing my relationship with Jason would be nearly impossible now, and the trust between us had been shattered beyond repair, and it was all my fault. I couldn't believe how quickly everything had unraveled. One moment I was coming back home from a night out, feeling guilty but determined to make things right, and the next I found myself locked out of my own home, my belongings scattered outside like unwanted baggage. It was like a cruel awakening to the reality of my actions and the fact that actions had consequences. As devastated as my parents were, My parents also surprised me by offering their support. They suggested staging an intervention with Jason, hoping to convince him to reconsider. Despite their disappointment, they believed in second chances and were willing to stand by me as I tried to mend what I had broken. They said I had only cheated once, and so Jason could forgive me. After about 3 weeks of staying with my parents, reality hit hard. My job was located far from my parents' house, and it required a commute I couldn't manage without one of the cars, which Jason hadn't given me access to. So with a heavy heart, I had to quit. It was another blow to my already shattered sense of stability and independence. Determined to salvage what I could, my parents and I decided to stage an intervention with Jason. They believed in second chances and hoped that Jason, being the compassionate person they knew him to be, would forgive me for my mistake. We arrived at his house with hopeful hearts, but as the minutes ticked by during the conversation, it became evident that Jason's decision was final. He at first welcomed my parents warmly. Jason loved and respected my parents a lot. However, despite their heartfelt pleas and attempts to bridge the gap, Jason remained resolute. He couldn't look past the betrayal, and the trust that had once bound us was irreparably broken. Jason told me that the kindest thing I could do for him right now was to sign the divorce papers the moment. He sent them over so we wouldn't have to drag this out in court. I felt such a lump form in my throat, the weight of his words crushing me. I had hoped for a different outcome, but deep down, I knew this was coming. I had shattered our trust, and there was no going back. He didn't need to remind me of how much I had hurt him. The guilt weighed heavily on my heart. With a heavy heart, I agreed and promised to sign the papers once they were ready. Jason thanked my parents for their understanding, but asked us to leave. It was a somber moment as we gathered our things and headed out, leaving behind the life we once shared. As we drove away, a mix of emotions washed over me: regret, sorrow, and a profound sense of loss. I knew I had to accept the consequences of my actions, but it didn't make it any easier to bear. That's where I'm at now, Reddit. Facing the reality of my mistakes and trying to find a way to move forward, even if it means starting over from scratch. It's a painful realization, but I had to accept that sometimes, even the strongest bonds can't withstand certain actions. I hope Jason has an amazing life without me. Everything was my fault. You can't eat your cake and have it. Thanks for listening.